life is going to happen to you. It's not always going to be great, but it's really, really important to keep moving forward.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen.
Okay, good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted to be today's guest. So we introduce himself. Dustin, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Dustin Wilson. I'm the startup community manager at Nexcor, which is an entrepreneur development organization based in Rochester, New York. And you can cut this out if you want, but I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity. Doing a podcast like this is challenging for me. It's me putting myself out there and trying to grow. And so opportunities like this that can be casual are greatly appreciated.
Yeah, no. And I'm really excited about this conversation. Dustin, I don't know. I mean, we are connected through Ellie Price, who has been on this podcast as well. And outside of the fact that, besides the fact that Ellie and I were on a panel at the UN at some point a couple of years ago, we have a special connection because Ellie is like you, also from the Rochester.
We grew up in the same town, actually.
So
which is a little crazy.
you might have heard during that episode. I don't know if I cut that out or not, but I have had family. So the brother of my mother used to live in Rochester. He passed away already. So I still have family there. And when I was around 12, 13 years old, I spent a couple of weeks alone with that particular family in Rochester. So I know, I went to soccer matches of my cousin. So I know where you live. That's the whole environment. So it's really cool that you were willing to talk with me today. But yet, tell a bit about your roots in a relatively small place. I think it was Hilton in particular, not Rochester, right? So yeah, how did your family, neighborhood, early community life maybe shape the way you think about economy, value, belonging? So maybe start with telling a bit about the siblings and what you used to do and yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it's really interesting. My parents split when I was really young, like young enough to me, I don't remember them ever being together. But unlike a lot of kids, and maybe it's because it was so young, I never thought it was a issue. I actually loved two Christmases, two Thanksgivings, and despite that they were split, they raised me very similarly, with a lot of kind of shared values, which is really interesting. You don't notice that stuff till you look back on it, but it was all there. But yeah, I lived with my mother in the city of Rochester until it just kind of became too challenging a place for them to live, and everybody was kind of escaping the cities for the suburbs. And so we moved out to Hilton, New York, which was a huge benefit for my father because he lives in Brockport, New York. And it was probably 20 minutes closer for the pickup and drop off. Um, and it's all kind of come a little bit full circle because I now live in Brockport, New York, in my grandparents' house.
Oh, really? Wow.
It was built by my great grandparents as a wedding gift to my grandparents. And now I get to go through and renovate it, which has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So all that to say is I spent maybe the first 5, 6 years of my life living in the city. And then moving out to the suburbs is really where my formative years kind of happened. And it was fantastic for me. Small college, probably not the most popular kid in school, but I always had sort of a confidence and sense of self. So I never really cared what my popularity was. I do feel like growing up right in the village was really, really beneficial because it gave my mother the assurance to give me a sense of independence. So as young as 9, 10 years old, I'm traveling and exploring the neighborhoods myself, walking up into town to buy a beverage at the local grocery store. And I think opportunities like that allowed me to be independent at a young age and be successful at being independent was a huge contributor to sort of the confidence that I have and sort of have developed throughout my life. And I've got a couple of other stories I can share that have reinforced that for me, and how it's had an impact on sort of where I've gone in life. But I want to make sure I got to your question. I don't know that I answered it specifically.
No, no, it's no, it's good to get that background. Were you, yeah, were you involved with community activities at all? And yeah, tell a bit about that. And did you have any siblings?
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up with a brother.
Hmm.
He has since passed, which is
Oh,
unfortunate, but it's
yeah.
been 11, 12 years at this point. So
Sure.
I'm fairly over the experience. But it was one of the greatest things ever. I loved my brother. Had a very, very close, tight knit group of friends. A lot of my friends became his and his became mine. We were only 11 months apart, actually. So Irish twins, I think they call that. Um, but only one grade apart. And so a lot of what we did together. And I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Yeah. So tell us about, that how you maybe ultimately came into the field where you're working now. Um, and
Yeah, that's
maybe,
a
where there's yeah, some early storytellers, some people that inspired you to, that were kind of instrumental in your journey towards what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long, winding journey.
Mm.
I'm a first generation college student, so neither of my parents went to college. I don't even know if my mother graduated high school. I think she ended up going back for her GRE. So when I graduated high school, I was basically given the ultimatum: go to college or start paying rent. Which, at the time you're like, what's all this about? But I look back at it and I'm like, oh, I think that was a pretty smart decision. The only problem was I had no idea what college was or what it could do for me. So because I knew I didn't want to start paying rent right away, I decided to go to college. And I said, anthropology sounds interesting. And it didn't take long for me to recognize I was not ready for college. And I ended up dropping out. At that point in time, I was attempting to go into the military because I wanted to learn how to fly, but I have asthma and I'm colorblind, so I was not military material. And so an uncle got me a job at U.S. airports, and I fueled jets for a while. And then there was an incident there where somebody I was working with came in contact with a carcinogenic chemical and had like a mental breakdown because of it. And I was like, I'm not getting paid enough out of high school to deal with this kind of stress at
Uh,
work. So I started just doing landscaping. I got paid more to landscape than I did to fuel and de-ice jets. And so um, really spent the first part of my career sort of in the trades. I went from landscaping to apprenticing as an electrician. And I kind of saw what the trades did to people. I love the trades, and there's nothing like that sense of uh, completion or sense of finishing something once you're done with the project. But just about everybody I had worked with was broken and beaten and sore at the end of their lives. And so in 2008, I got laid off from the little electrical shop that I was working at, and I said, "Well, now's a good time for me to go to school because I've had some experience. I know what I don't want to do, and I'm going to approach school differently." So rather than going and talking to a counselor and listening to the direction they want me to go, I just took uh, things that sounded interesting to me. And through that experience, I recognized that I had a passion and a love for the music industry. And at one point, I would love the opportunity to work with musicians, bring them to our region, and maybe run my own sort of studio or not
uh,
studio venue. So I started taking more and more music courses, and it was time for me to graduate with my associate's degree. And I was looking at my next step, and I got accepted into Full Sail University. But at this point, I had recognized how expensive college was, and Full Sail was just mind-numbingly expensive. And so I said, I don't think I have no financial support. I'm taking loans to get through school now. I don't think I can handle that. So I ended up speaking with one of my music professors who said, well, SUNY Fredonia, just down the state, has a fantastic music program. And the capstone professor there is Armand Petrie, the producer of the Google Dolls. So if you want to get into that industry, go know that guy. And so that's kind of how I started approaching my career
Mm.
from that point on, which was who do I need to go get to know that can help me get to my next step?
Mhm.
I'll take a break there if you have any questions, but
Yeah, eh, about your, because your uncle at a certain moment you said offered
yeah.
you a job. How did that happen? I mean, did you go to the uncle or the uncle went
Yeah,
to you?
I think it was at a holiday party or whatever, and we were
Okay.
talking about what I was doing,
Yeah.
and I said, I'm landscaping at the moment, or no, I wasn't landscaping at the moment. I was working with a general contractor, and he was paying me $4 an hour or something like that under the table, and I
Mm.
was like, I just know this isn't sustainable. I'd like to do something exciting with my career. I've always kind of been an adventure seeker, a thrill seeker of that kind. And I said, it'd be great to like fly airplanes. And my uncle built airplanes.
Mm.
So he's like, well, listen, I happen to have a network of people in the aviation space. I can get you a job at US airports. And so that's how that happened. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And what made you then decide to still go to college? Because the first time it didn't work out. So you can imagine that you would have thought, okay, I'm going now from job to job and getting money.
Yeah.
So why would I go to school again? What
Well,
made
it's
you?
interesting too, because there was a stigma at the time of like, I was an adult learner.
Mm.
And, I thought, I, I feel like I'm doing it the smart way because I know what I want now rather than wasting money not knowing what I'd like. But really, it came from that experience in the trades where, again, I liked what I did and I was good at it, but I recognized everybody that I worked with was kind of a broken person. They were on pain medication, they were sore, they hated getting up at night. And I figured I may love this now, but I don't think I've met a person, that's had a
Mm.
successful career that still loves it at the end. And I'd like to keep doing what I'm doing for as long as I can rather than
Mm.
letting my body tell me when I can quit or not. So,
Okay. Yeah. Got it. Yeah. So tell us about, you know, then what happened?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So I end up getting accepted into SUNY Fredonia. And I'm taking a business administration degree with a concentration in music industry because I kind of thought, well, if the music industry doesn't work out, because I know that it's a challenging place to work, at least I've got a business degree and I can do something more with that. So I was a little intentional about how I approached that one. And I landed in college. Unfortunately, that's around the time my brother passed away. So my
mm.
first semester was kind of a blur of going home
Yeah.
to
Sure.
be with the family and try and do my, college experience. So it doesn't feel like I had like the typical party college experience, which is not anything I was super interested in anyway. But my first kind of year, 2 years are a little bit of a blur because it was a lot of back and forth and just going through coursework. Um, but there were two sort of pivotal moments that happened in my college career um, at that point, which was I did get to know Armand Petrie and I did work with him and he did get me a job in the music industry. And I got to go out and explore that job and recognize I don't want to work in the music industry. One of those don't work in what you love kind of situations. Um, but probably the more pivotal experience was being connected with my organizational behavior professor who taught me the concept of entrepreneurship. Essentially, her course was to build a business. And it was something that I took to like nothing in the academic world that I had ever taken to before. And she enrolled me in a program called Enactus, which I honestly don't even know the acronym because I had no idea about the program. She just put me in it. And I ended up winning an award for excellence in leadership through that program
Mm.
without having any idea that I had been submitted for it. And basically, throughout that program, I led a group of students to build a company that I thought was strong enough to actually take out of the college. And about halfway, maybe three-quarters of the way through the semester, she said, okay, you're doing a great job here. I want to see what happens if I take you out of your company that's accelerating and put you in the worst company and see what you can do with them. And I can remember sitting down with that team And they basically looked at me like the teacher's pet and said, okay, what are you going to do to fix this? And I got to say, I'm not going to do anything. I will help you guys understand what you need to do to fix this. But I'm not going to do the work that you guys should have been doing. And it's because of that conversation, really, that she put me up for this leadership award and everything, because she thought I did a great job sort of handling being taken from a really successful position and being put into this sort of uh I was concerned for my grade because I was like, I hope this really doesn't impact my grade. They're in last, and I want to graduate really, really well. Um, and so at the end of that experience, they called me a chameleon because I could blend in with just about any situation that I was dropped into, and it gave me a lot of confidence, sort of to pursue my own business ideas, and that led through many, many different stories
Mm-hmm.
to what I do now. But essentially, I graduated from that program with the concept of entrepreneurship in my brain and having had tried a couple of different business ideas that didn't really work. And after graduating, worked in the music industry, decided I didn't want to be there. So I just got hired as like a data entry specialist at a large corporate role
Uh,
or for a large corporation, and sort of through my entrepreneurial thinking was able to complete projects much faster than they had expected me to, and I secured myself a permanent position within the organization and ended up working my way up through the product marketing function, to a product marketing manager for one of their largest product lines. And I did a lot of work there. That was fun and interesting, but it was very difficult to stay innovative and to ideate within a large corporate setting. And I'm incredibly grateful for the experience because it taught me how to be a professional.
mm,
But it just wasn't the right spot for me to sort of flex my strengths. Um, so while I was working at that organization, I was also building my own startup and working a part-time job to pay off my student loans. And so I was kind of burning myself out. I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning, bike just because I wanted the exercise, bike to my 11 miles to my corporate role, work an 8-hour shift there, bike to my part-time job, work until 11, 12 o'clock at night, bike uh, 15 miles back home, sleep, get up, do it all throughout the day. And then Fridays, I didn't work the part-time job. I worked on my business. And then weekends was events because we were event-based business.
mhm.
And so events were 12, 14-hour days. And I did that for through 2.5, maybe 3 years before I kind of got to a point where I got burnt out a little bit. And I'm happy to give details on that business, but that's kind of what my
Yeah,
early
yeah.
college career led to.
Wow. And I I I wanted to go back a bit about the job in the music business. Why do you think that didn't work out? Because that was kind of, when I was
Yeah.
listening to you, oh, you're so passionate about music. So it seems to be a
Yeah.
right fit, but it didn't work, right?
I
Didn't
think it
work
was a
out.
cultural thing.
Hmm.
The music industry is very much about having a good time, partying, and even then, I was working my part-time job trying to pay off my
Mm,
loans, right? So, because I was very, very, very debt adverse, and so I wasn't the guy that wanted to go out and party at the end of the night. I was the guy that went home and went to bed and got up and went to work. And so, because of that, it was hard to really develop strong relationships in that ecosystem. And I can really remember my breaking point. We had hosted Insane Clown Posse, ICP, which is a band, and they own the soda brand Fago. And at the end of their shows, they shake the soda up and they spray it all over the crowd. And it's a lot of fun until at 2 o'clock in the morning you're cleaning soda out of speaker systems and off the seats and things like that. And so at that point, I was like, this is fun, but I don't think it's a career, and I would
Mm.
really like to have a career. Um,
Okay.
and so
Okay.
that's one of the decisions or one of the incidences that led me to leave the industry. And I
Okay.
enjoy music immensely now,
Hmm.
and I don't have to work in it to do that.
Okay. I would like us to jump to what you're doing now.
Yeah.
But before we go there, let us sit with the music for a little bit longer, because I always music is also very important to me.
Sure.
So it's one of the reasons that you see also a lot of musicians that have been part of this podcast. And if you did not check some of those episodes out, I really encourage you to do so, because they're one of my favorites always.
Yeah.
And been very fortunate with great musicians. But the question that I always ask about music is, if I ask you to come up with a piece of music or a song that best
Mhm.
embodies what you are about, what Dustin is about, for a big part, which song or piece of music would that be, and why?
Yeah. The first one that came to mind, there's probably many, many out there. But a song that's gotten me through a lot of challenging times is a song called "Moving Forward" by a group called Colony House. And I love the song because it has this realistic but positive message that basically says, life is going to happen to you. It's not always going to be great, but it's really, really important to keep moving forward. And I think as I look back at my life, there's been a lot of times where I could have perceived things in a very negative way and decided not to move forward or decided to just be comfortable with where I was at. And uh, that song always kind of comes to mind where it's like, well, this is just a phase of that. You got to keep moving forward. You got to push yourself forward. And even doing a podcast, right, is a nice example of this. We're like, all right, I got to figure out ways to build my brand that aren't necessarily intuitive to me, but I want to keep pushing and keep moving forward. I'm an ambitious person, and so that one comes to mind immediately. Um, I would offer another one, except it's escaping me right now. I chose the song that my wife and I used as our wedding song intentionally because it talks a little bit about the selfish side of love. Um, it's called "Forever Like That" by Ben Rector. And the idea in that song, or at least the way I interpret it, is that these are the things he wants, this person, the narrator wants out of this relationship. And I think that's something that's often overlooked when it comes to relationships. You think of a relationship as I need to be giving you this, 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 and this. But I think inherently we're selfish people, and recognizing that this is what I'm getting out of this relationship and this is how it's going to benefit us is a unique spin on a love song. And so I think that one I'd throw in the ring as well.
Okay. And thank you for that, and that will be added to a Spotify playlist
Oh, great.
that we developed. If you search for hashtag Walk Talk Listen, you see all the songs that were selected by my guests in the last 2 years or more. Yeah, let us jump to what you're doing now, because I'm really interested. Ellie
Yeah.
speaks so
So I'll hit a
favorable
couple
about all
bullet
of it.
points,
Yeah.
couple bullet points to get us there. Essentially, there was an inflection point with my corporate role where I had to make the decision: did I want to continue with it, or did I want to do something else? And I decided not to continue with the corporate role and to go get my MBA in global social and sustainable enterprise. So I moved out to Colorado um, during COVID, right before COVID, to obtain my MBA in basically building a business that has a net positive impact on the world. I kind of looked at the way business was being done and understanding my interpretation of a C corporation is that you need to keep shareholders in mind before stakeholders. And I personally think that's one of the things that has really messed up the world the way it is now. And I recognized that there was a different way people were trying to do it through benefit corporations, and global social and sustainable enterprise taught us about the benefit corporations and things like that. While I was out at that program, the idea of that was to build a sustainable business that had a net positive impact. And after multiple pivots in different directions, I had built something that we were pretty proud of with a team that was basically Zappos for heirloom food products. So a digital online marketplace for heirloom spaghetti sauces and grains and things like that. Um, and I was very proud about with what we built. We had received a lot of positive feedback on it. But while I was out in Colorado, I met my to be wife, my current wife, but at the time, my future wife, right? Um, and we had decided that we wanted to do a business or a family. And I knew from the multiple startups that I had tried and some of the successful ones that I had run that mixing those two worlds together, one of them was going to suffer. So after graduating, I decided not to move forward with the business, and I just took a job at a startup, which was a mistake because I felt as though I jumped right back into what I was doing before I went and got my MBA. So with my wife's support, I left that role and I spent some time searching. I thought I'd end up at like a Techstars, right? Because I was out in Colorado. And during COVID, networking was really, really challenging and nothing really kind of materialized. So I linked up with an early stage founder and helped him found a business, which is what I said I wasn't going to do. But we found a business called No Cap that was basically trying to change our experience and our knowledge for equity in a company. So we don't come from money, we're not accredited investors, but we have experiences and knowledge that we can share. So how do we change that into sort of a successful investing career? Challenges with that were you couldn't monetize it, right? We needed to be a nonprofit and we didn't want to be. And so after a couple of years trying to figure out how we turn this into a revenue generating business that can sustain us, we decided to go our separate ways, basically. It wasn't a huge falling out, it was just kind of like a disconnecting, right? Um, but that experience, as well as my wife's willingness to look back at Western New York from Boulder, Colorado, led to an opportunity to join a nonprofit organization called Launch New York here in Western New York. And I spent nearly 3 years with that organization, and I really credit it for showcasing to me how economic development works. It refined the way I speak and mentor companies, and it really gave me sort of the foundation that I needed to develop the career that I have now. It was my first job within my existing career, right? And I still work with that organization on a regular basis. But I was living in Brockport, driving to Buffalo, and an opportunity came up to drive to Rochester instead. And it's a nice little small world moment, but I work for a company now called Nexcor that resides in the Sibley Tower building in downtown Rochester, which is where my mother had her entire career. So now I get to go work in the same building that my mother worked in for her career. And the fun part about that is it had its ups and downs. And so I've seen it at its height, and then I saw it at its absolute lowest, and now I'm a part of its come up, if you will. So
Wow. Oh, that's a great story. Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, yeah. So um, when Ellie wrote me a note, but basically she described you as someone actively rewriting economic development narratives. From job counts to sustainable local wealth creation. And so, what's the old story we are still telling communities, and what is the new story that you're trying to help people imagine?
yeah, it's interesting. I think maybe that's been over exaggerated a little bit, but I'm doing the best I can. So I look at economic development and I recognize working with startups that the best thing that we can do for them is really maximize the resources that they have. And when you're first starting out, the resources you have are your time and what's in your bank account. And so my approach to trying to assist startups is really how do I shorten your time to a yes no decision for whether you should continue to pursue this idea or not as quick as possible. When it comes from an economic development standpoint, I look at how the economy is changing, right? And if you think about the ways most nonprofits in the economic development space fund, it's on economic development from a jobs creation perspective. But if you look at AI and how it's going to disrupt the workforce, a company that would have had 1,500 employees now needs 15. And so when I think about economic development in the future, relying on jobs created doesn't seem to be the right metric to sustain sort of this ecosystem. So, in my mind, it really comes down to wealth creation, but most importantly, wealth retention within specific regions. And I think our economic development organizations are going to have to adjust to that new reality. So as I sort of develop my career and hopefully find myself in positions where I can help shape the way these economic development organizations operate. These are things that I have in mind, and sort of maybe the fresh perspective that the next generation of economic development organizers is going to have to have. So that's my opinions on that, or my approach to that, basically.
And maybe I can take you to, something that I try to talk about very often in my podcast as well, and that's about sustainable development goals. Um, I'm kind of assuming that you've heard about the SDGs, and
I
they
have
were
heard of them. I
yeah
need a refresher, but I'm familiar. Yeah.
yeah, so they were developed, right, um, actually by a lot of people within the world from different sectors, with the realization that we need a world that's more just and sustainable. And so 17 goals were identified, from ending poverty to end hunger, to partnerships that are required. Maybe those are too many goals, but at least it was part of a discussion. There was some kind of a consensus. They're not perfect. The framework is not perfect, but I think, it's at least something that we were working on together. However, we are getting closer to 2030. We just started 2026, and these goals we should um, reach them before 2030. But we are on average at 15 to 70%, and maybe even more recently we have gone even more down. Um, Now, one of the a growing group of people in the world is saying, one of the reasons that we are not reaching those goals has to do is that we did not pay proper attention to the knowledge, abilities, and the skills that you need as an individual and as a community to work on those system changes. Because I think if I listen to you, you're also talking about, mindset, but also, if you don't think as growth as the ultimate goal, but it's more about retaining and harmony and balance. Something needs to happen, and at least that growing group of people are saying that, and they came up with the inner development goals. There were 5 goals that they identified: being, thinking, collaborating, relating, and acting. And then there are 25 skills under it, like empathy, critical thinking. So I have 2 questions maybe about this, the SDGs and the IDGs. Um, and that is, yeah, what are your thoughts about the SDGs, and what do you want people to know about it? And then about the IDGs, and what is your reaction when you hear about this? Because many people have never heard of them. Um, yeah, does it resonate with something that you are trying to work on? And
Yeah, absolutely. So for the SDGs, right? I come back to my understanding of a C Corp, which is maximizing value for stakeholders rather than shareholders. And I think until we can get rid of that, which there have been attempts, right? But until we can get rid of that mentality, which is let's reward those that have, taken the risk, but not pay much attention to those that we have a huge impact on, um, we're going to be hampered in our ability to accomplish those goals. Unfortunately, it's just the way the systems work and the way investments are incentivized. If I'm giving you my money, of course, I want the largest return, right? And so I feel like we came up with the B Corp certification, which basically says, hey, rather than stakeholders, we're going to work on shareholders, but then they're more difficult to be invested in, right? So you don't see a whole lot of them. And that's where we came up with B Corp certification, which is kind of like, hey, I'm going to promise to do the best I can. But at the end of the day, it comes down to maximizing value for the stakeholders. And so I think it's going to take a concerted effort to um, to overcome that in order for us to make progress, because business can be done, and there are many many case studies that showcase this, but business taking stakeholders into consideration does have a huge positive impact and can be done sustainably. But just the way, I guess it's the capitalist system works, right, is the economic drivers need to align with those goals. Otherwise we're kind of fighting the system rather than working with the system. And that's one of the reasons I originally decided to go back and chose that specific MBA program, is because they talked a lot about natural capital protocol, SDGs, and how to align sort of your business objectives and the economic impact that's going to have with net positive impacts. Yeah. Um, for the other goals there, the five, it's really interesting. I've sort of developed my own coursework around this idea that there are 8 core soft skills that aspiring founders need to learn in order to gain the confidence to go launch their business. And so I think from a skills perspective, we don't do a very good job of working on the person themselves. I actually came up with this idea because I've worked with a lot of venture development and economic support organizations, and they will tell you, especially within the angel investing world, that we invest in a team or a person before anything else. But then if you looked at the activities, it's all about the business. Do you have traction? Do you have a good marketing strategy? Do you have a defensible IP? Very little time is actually spent on the human component of it. Um, and so I think there's a need to address that. Absolutely.
And those 8 points that you're
Yeah.
what can you share those?
Yeah.
Or is
Yeah.
that your secret? You're part of
No,
your.
no, no. They're not a secret. And honestly, I've deliberately, it's coursework that I've built and organized, but I use
Okay.
tools that exist because there's no
Yeah.
need to reinvent the wheel at all.
No.
It's
Sure.
all out there. So the first soft skill, I may butcher this. I haven't looked at it in a while, but the first soft skill is really self-assessment. What am I good at? Who
Mm.
do I need to connect with to help me overcome the discrepancies in what I'm capable of doing? Right. So I am very much an ideation guy, and I'm not very much a closer guy. Doesn't mean I can't finish projects, but it means the amount of energy it takes me to start something is drastically different than the amount of effort and energy I have to put into finishing a project. Right. So the first one is really understanding who you are and who you need to work with. The second one is communication skills. It's not just about who you are that you can work with, but it's about how you can talk to each other. And if we don't know how to communicate really well, then nothing gets done. Things get lost in translation. Um, After that, I'm gonna pull them up actually because I want to get this right, and I haven't looked at it in a minute, but I do have it right in front of me. Um, okay, so your first one is your soft skills. That's the one that we've spoken of already, and you may have to edit this. The second one is your mindset. You need to have a growth mindset. Fixed versus growth mindsets are something that we talk about in the entrepreneurship world. And it's really important to recognize that just because you don't have a skill to go accomplish a goal doesn't mean you can't go learn that skill. I teach a class at SUNY Brockport on entrepreneurship, and one of my students brought me a company called Sideline Swap. And basically, when the founder started, they had no idea how to build an actual
Mm.
program. They just had this idea for a business. And so they took night classes and they went out and they learned how to build this program, and now they have a functioning business. And so it really illustrates that growth mentality. Um, the third one is communication, written and oral communication. How do you speak with clarity about what it is that your goals and your intentions are? This quote is often attributed to Mark Twain. I don't know if that's true or not, but I love the quote. If I had more time, I would have written less, because it showcases that good communication takes a while to craft. It's not something you just rolls off the tip of your tongue. Um, the fourth one would be networking. I think networking is one of the most important skills that a founder can have, because we only live inside our own lived experience. And so the opportunities that come my way, if they were just within my orbit, are minuscule. But as I go out and network and talk to other people and learn about their sort of orbits, the world opens up, the opportunities open up, and the connections open up. So I think networking is really, really important. Fifth one is that opportunity recognition. Being able to recognize when there is an opportunity that you should be taking advantage of. I liken this to skate eye. I grew up as a skateboarder, and I can't drive past a stair set or a handrail that I can't think I should be able to do a trick there, regardless of whether I can now that I'm older or not. But the same thing should be true for opportunities. You should be finding them absolutely everywhere. There are skills that you can use to develop that ability. One of my favorite Harvard Business Review articles is on the 5 innovation skills that talk about how do you do opportunity recognition. Um, the sixth one is data parsing. So as you go out and you explore and you interact with people, you're going to get a lot of data all at once. Much of it will be contradictory. So you need to have a good understanding of what data do you listen to when and why. And there are ways to develop those skills, and to look at things um, sort of from a metacognition standpoint rather than feeling it in the moment, but taking a step back and looking at, okay, these 7 people are telling me this, these 4 people are telling me that. I either got to get them together and get them to come to a consensus, or I have to make the right decision based off of the inputs that I'm getting. And then the eighth one would be understanding that failure is a spectrum. It is not a one and done. And so there are extreme failures that are absolutely don't move forward, but part of the entrepreneurial process is failing repeatedly because you're constantly developing and testing hypotheses, and that one failure is not akin to another, and you have to be able to recognize that there's a spectrum there. So those are the 8 skills that I
Yeah.
put together through
Okay.
coursework around.
No, thanks for sharing that. So with Dustin's 8, it's never too late. So um, I you were mentioning networking as part of that, and I think that's connected with relating, one of the inner development goals. And under relating, you have connecting. You need to be able to connect. I mean, you can go to a venue where there are a lot of people, but if you're not able to connect, and you need to have empathy as well, um, I I I hope that this podcast is contributing to connection, and because connection is also the first step in maybe starting a dialogue, and I think that's more needed than ever. We are so living in such a polarized world, and even with people that you disagree with for 99%, you can still maybe have a discussion because there is this 1% that you can connect. So I try to kind of build that in within this podcast as well. I'm going to connect you with the previous guest who has a question for you.
What example can you give where you experienced also something in your life, can be personal life, can be work life, but that changed your course of action, that completely not so much that inspires you to take action in your field, but that kind of you were in a certain trajectory in your work or in your private life, you were, had certain ambitions, but then you had to change course. And it can also be relatively small. It doesn't have to be a big life event. But what triggered that? And did it bring you something in the end that you did not expect in beforehand? That would be my question.
Yeah, I've got a lot of these. I think the one that jumps to mind comes from sort of my bachelor's degree. Uh, I was asked by a friend of mine to join him in helping establish an American marketing chapter um, on the college, so that way we could participate in an AMA program, basically. And we ended up getting the chapter developed, and we worked with Hershey's on some marketing campaign. Um, but it was kind of like this innocuous thing that I just got involved with because I happened to be, part of the friend group that was doing it. But it really is the experience that led to my first corporate role. And I would have never saw that coming because I thought I was positioning myself well with the business degree, and I was going to end up in the music industry. And now all of a sudden, I need to figure out what to do next. And just this kind of one-off moment in my undergrad uh, absolutely changed that trajectory for me by getting me that first sort of corporate role. So there's a million of them, but that
Okay.
one
Yeah.
jumped out to
No,
me.
thanks. Yeah, your question for the next guest.
Yeah, I had one written here, and now I can't find it. So I'm gonna have
Take
to
your
come up
time.
with one off the top of my head. We've talked a lot about sort of spheres of influence and opportunities through networking and taking advantage of those opportunities. I think that's kind of been maybe a theme throughout this conversation. So I would be curious to ask that guest maybe if there's somebody in their life that they could potentially provide an opportunity to that would unlock a door for them that they didn't expect or didn't know coming. Very similar to how I got on this podcast, right? A one-off conversation with Ellie, who happened to say, "Hey, I did this podcast. I have this great experience. Would you be interested in that opportunity?" So I would ask that person if they could think of anybody in their life that they could maybe give a similar opportunity to.
Okay, great. I like that. It is talking about the podcast. This podcast is a spin-off of a 100-mile walk that I started in 2012. During COVID, I was still able to walk, but not being able to accompanied by somebody else. So I thought, okay, I'm going to virtually walk, and it has gone a little bit out of hand. We're still in 2026, still doing this. Um, but basically, I started this to raise awareness and funds, for hunger, uh, injustice, um, and poverty. Um, w- yeah, so it has to do with what drives me, right? So my question to you is, what drives you? Why would you walk the extra 100 mile? Um, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a dead horse, but it really is being able to make these opportunities,
Hmm.
open these doors for other people. I think that's why I'm so happy in the career that I have is because
Hmm.
I am a connector of people and I'm constantly creating opportunity. I've got a little side story that just popped up the other day. I was having a conversation with one of the mentors that I work with, one of the entrepreneurs in residence, who just happens to be opening a garden center. Um, and it's kind of serendipitously, an old friend of mine from elementary school reconnected, and this person's sort of in the process of rebuilding their life, and they have found through working at various garden centers a love for gardening, and now their ambitions are to kind of advance their career. Sort of being in this garden center space. And so I got the both of them connected, and now there's an incredible opportunity for this person sort of rebuilding their life to take another jump forward. And that's what keeps me going.
Mm, great. That's great. Yeah. I kind of assume that you also work with, the younger generation. Um, and yeah, I don't, yeah, but what I would like to ask you about it, when you interact or when you observe them, yeah, what do you notice about how they search for meaning, agency, and purpose? Um, and
Yeah.
maybe in addition to that yeah, do you see that there is an increasing role for games and digital worlds? Maybe
Yes,
in
yes and
comparison
no.
to the more traditional institutions like church and, community.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really interesting. I think they are trying to figure it out still. As I mentioned, I teach a freshman course
mhm.
on entrepreneurship at SUNY Rockport. And throughout my course, I challenge them to build a business, and I will always give them here's a problem that I think you guys should try and solve. And the problem that I gave them for this year was how do you foresee your generation connecting in the future? Because with artificial intelligence, the digital space is going to be a lot more challenging to trust. I think we already have seen challenges with connecting through the digital medium to begin with. Um, but with I think what we'll see is a flood of sort of fakeness, and it's just gonna kind of erode what little bit of credibility remains in these digital systems. And so I was really curious to understand what their thoughts were. Um, and they didn't have a whole lot for me, to be honest with you. They're not super interested in um, sort of changing their state. So they're not interested in going out and using alcohol as a liquid courage to go connect with people. So they want something that's a little bit that's genuine, but it needs to be in a safe space. And I don't think they've figured out how to make it feel safe yet. where we would in the past have used alcohol or drugs or some sort of altering mechanism. They're not interested in that. They want to get right down to a brass tacks, but they haven't figured out kind of what makes it safe. So I'm really curious to see how this upcoming generation tackles that problem. But I suspect it'll be analog.
Well, could they go back then to church, like in the
Sure.
old
Yeah.
days? Yeah, you would see that
So
happening.
potentially, um, I think people are looking for meaning in things, but I think science has advanced to a place where we don't all believe that there's like one creator, right? I think it's Ricky Gervais maybe has a fantastic quote as an atheist. He says, "I just believe in one less God than you do, considering the thousands and thousands of gods that are out there." Um, so I don't know that this upcoming generation needs sort of a placeholder up there. But I do think they crave that sense of shared belonging, in that sense of community that religion and the church can actually provide.
Okay, you mentioned a couple of challenges that we have already and might further increase in maybe in the near future. But talking about now, what worries you most right now about communities, economies, leadership?
Yeah, it's probably the divisiveness, the inability to sort of be authentic.
Hmm.
As someone who considers themselves fairly centrist, I don't know that I have place in the discourse right now, or I certainly don't feel welcome in the discourse right now. Yeah, I feel like you have to be extreme in your views. And I feel like I'm very practical and pragmatic in my views, and I just don't know that I have a, a voice right now. And so that's a little worrying because without that ability to try and reach across sort of the aisle and come to some sort of general consensus, we're never going to make the progress that we need to.
Mm. Do you still see hope? And if so, where?
Oh yeah, I absolutely see hope. There's part of me that feels like a lot of this divisiveness is people trying to hold on to what's existed rather than craft what's to come. And I think that mentality will be overwhelmed as younger generations come up and have a stronger voice. So I have no idea what our future is going to hold, but I'm very confident in this upcoming generation that they're going to build something that works for the world that they live in, not try and cling on to something that doesn't work for the world anymore.
Okay. Um, maybe piggybacking a little bit on that. I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Hartman of CBS. I'm not sure if he's still doing it, but he was searching for, one simple act of kindness and exploring how that could create a ripple effect. So I have two questions for you about that. What are your thoughts about one simple act of kindness and its potential to create a ripple effect? And then the second part of the question is, if I would ask you to commit one simple act of kindness this week or right now, what would it be?
Yeah. Yes, I absolutely agree. One simple act of kindness has a massive ripple effect. Tend to be an approachable person, so I've oftentimes like helped older people bring groceries into their house randomly because they needed the assistance. And I've got one other story that I think is really, really fun. My wife and I went swing dancing on our second date, and I left to go to the restroom and did not come back. So she came to find me, and as I was walking through the venue where dance hall was, I saw an elderly lady cleaning up after an event by herself, and I just went over and started. Thought I was helping her with one table, ended up helping her with the entire project. And my wife finds me like suit coat off, loading tables onto a platform. Um, so, that I say that just to illustrate that yes, I 100% believe that one little act of kindness has a massive ripple effect, and I think that's been pretty evident throughout this conversation. Um, what's something that I think I could probably do this week? Um, you know, I spent time as a cart collector in parking lots, and I often said you could tell the character of somebody by what they do with the cart.
Mm.
So also now as a parent, I have empathy for some people that maybe don't have the time to express themselves the way they want to. So if I could do one thing in this upcoming week, it's the next time I'm at a store, if somebody doesn't have the ability to return their cart, I could do that for them.
Right? I like that. I, and it's also, you cannot park your car anymore, right? If they are everywhere. So that's
Exactly.
great. Um, yeah, and, these conversations always go fast, Dustin. And maybe my last question for you is, you know, if I ask you, if listeners walk away remembering just one idea from this conversation about economy, community, agency, what would you want it to be?
Yeah, I would say be deliberate about the relationships in your life, make time for them, and be generous with your networks. That would probably be my takeaway because I think through those connections, we start sharing those ideas and we break down some of these sort of walls. And that's really, really important for where we're going.
Okay. Um, yeah, before I thank you for today, is there any question that I did not ask you today that I should have asked you?
Hmm. It's always hard to know what you don't know. But no, I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. Then I would like to thank you so much for the conversation today, for what you do, for who you are. All the best, and yeah, take care.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.